Hi, PSych. These are your Module 58 Trait Theories notes. Again, we are moving our way towards finishing up new content. We are almost there. Trait theories happens to be not to bias you at all, but it's my favorite personality theory, mostly because we're going to learn about the most scientifically valid theory, and you're going to get to take a personality inventory as the second part of the assignment for today, based on trait theory. So hopefully this will be exciting, interesting to you, as well as dispel some myths about some other inventories or tests that you may have taken before as well. So our essential question is, how do psychologists explain personality? Our learning targets are: I can compare and contrast trait theories of personality with other theories of personality. 2, I can identify frequently used assessment strategies. We'll be looking at something called the MMPI and evaluate relative test quality based on reliability and validity of the instruments. And then finally, I can identify key contributors to personality theory. We'll be looking at the work of Costa and McCrae. They're the ones that first came up with trait theory. So first, what are traits? Since that's going to be the focus for us today. And a trait is a characteristic pattern of behavior or a disposition to feel and act as assessed by a self-reported inventory and or peer reports. So for example, if you've started working on your 30 slips for your project, essentially what I'm having people write for you are traits. What is that pattern of behavior or that disposition to feel and act? So some history of trait theory, and then I'm going to burst a bubble for some of you. I apologize in advance. So trait theory, kind of the first little whispers of this were started by Gordon Allport after meeting Freud. And Allport, after meeting Freud and examining personality, went, nah, Freud, a little too much emphasis on the unconscious mind, and thought that instead we should focus on observable patterns of behavior. And he thought those are going to be better indicators of someone's personality. Related to this idea, going back to the work of a neo-Freudian, were a mother-daughter team, Isabel Briggs Myers and Catherine Briggs, who had no psychological training whatsoever, decided that they really liked the work of Carl Jung and decided to base this personality inventory that they created based on some kind of patterns that Jung described in his research. So they developed what is today known, very, very widespread, the MBTI, or Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. I am sure that many of you have taken an MBTI before. If you know your letters, are you an ESTP? Are you an INFJ? Whatever the combination. Taking this assessment, this personality indicator, gives you a 4-letter designation. And it's become wildly popular. Businesses use it. You can find them all over. You see charts like this. What Harry Potter character is most like you based on your type indicator. All sorts of things. If you've ever taken the 16 personalities test, same idea. Okay. It's very well liked, mostly because the results are all pretty complementary. No matter what type you're sorted in, give you a little Harry Potter reference there, makes you sound pretty good. Different, but good. Here's the problem, okay? The criticism. Any of the research that this type indicator is supposedly based on was conducted by and published by the Myers-Briggs Foundation in journals that they own. Okay? There is no scientific basis to demonstrate that the type indicator has any sort of validity, that it actually tests what it claims to test. Okay. Now be careful. Remember, we've talked about the difference between validity and reliability. It may be reliable. You could take the MBTI today and 2 years from now and get the same type indicator. So reliability may be there, but there's nothing, there's no proof, there's no evidence to show that it's valid in terms of assessing traits. So if you've taken it before, it's fun, but also realize that it's not what we would consider good psychology. It's just not based on empirical evidence. So I'd like you to tell me, what is the problem with personality inventories like the Myers-Briggs type indicator? So I'll give you a moment to do that, and then we will move on. So hopefully one of the key things you just wrote down was, again, the idea that there's no proof to back it up, that it's shady to come up with a test, and then all of the research is done by the people who fund the test, and FYI, make lots of money of giving the rights to companies and individuals to give this test. So there's a big financial gain involved in having people continue to use this, which probably explains why it's so widespread. So next, we're going to explore this idea of traits a little bit further. So first, what we know about traits is there are a lot of them. As you guys start gathering those one-word answers via your Google form, people have like this seemingly infinite number of ways to describe who you are as a person. And some research has said that there's something like 18,000 different ways that we can describe people. And we know that each individual is a unique combination of traits. Okay, there's no way for us to really boil it down. It's not just like one trait or its opposite. There's lots of different ones. So this kind of led to an issue. Okay, we want to be able to describe people by traits, but how am I going to give any sort of assessment that measures for 18,000 different ones? Okay, so how do you narrow them down while maintaining an ability to account for these mixes? So we're going to look at historically what are some of the ways that that has been attempted. So first, kind of the earliest means was through something called factor analysis. And factor analysis is really a statistical procedure that grouped similar traits together, okay, into broader categories. So one example of some researchers, they were a husband and wife, Einsick and Einsick, narrowed down into these 4 major dimensions that you see here. So extroversion versus introversion, and then stable versus unstable. And looking at our chart here, if you see where my cursor is, you can see that you have all of these different ways here that kind of fall under, all these different traits that fall under these major categories. And they would basically place someone in one of these 4 axes. So you might be unstable extroverted, stable extroverted, introverted stable, or introverted unstable. And it was just a way of narrowing down to make the number of traits more manageable. The other thing that we need to consider, let's bring back some biology, we know it's in everything, okay, is we know that our biology also plays a role in our personality, and we can see this in the way traits are expressed. So, for example, brain scans indicate that people with different traits show differences in our actual brains. So one example of that, if we compare someone, if we give them a personality inventory that measures levels of extroversion, we know that people who are more extroverted, their normal brain arousal is lower. So that means they may actually seek out excitement versus someone who's more introverted. And similarly, dopamine and dopamine-related activity is higher in their brains. The other major influence of biology, this is something that we have talked about before, so hopefully this is just a reminder, is the way that temperament or our level of emotional reactivity is very much influenced by our genes. Okay? And along with behavioral style that helps us to define our personality. Another example, when we look at how reactive someone's autonomic nervous system is, remember autonomic controls our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, that people who have a more reactive autonomic nervous system tend to experience greater anxiety and inhibition. And we'll relate that later to one of the big 5 traits of neuroticism. So just to bring back that genetic connection, you're going to tell me, how would you describe your temperament to be similar or different from your family members? And you can be specific. Maybe you're more similar to one parent or another, or you see similarities with a grandparent or aunt and uncle, or are you way off? And you can explain that. Okay. Next, we're going to move into assessing traits. So if you've noticed a trend with all of the different theories we've talked about, with psychoanalytic and psychodynamic, we talked about projective tests like the TAT, the thematic apperception test, as well as the Rorschach inkblot test. Yesterday with humanistic theories, we talked about interviews and having conversations related to self-concept, was how it was assessed. Here with trait theory, we're going to see really a much more, probably, I don't want to say traditional, but it's more similar to probably what your expectation is that a personality test would look like. So the way that trait theory is assessed is through a personality inventory. That's a fancy way of saying a questionnaire. Okay. So it's a questionnaire that's designed to gauge a wide range of feelings and behaviors that's used to assess personality traits. As I mentioned at the beginning, you will be taking a personality inventory today, or whenever you decide to do it. I'm assigning it today. That will tell you where you are in the big 5 personality traits. The most popular, the most widely researched and clinically used, so this is reserved for mental health professionals only, is the MMPI, as it's abbreviated, or the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And typically, rather than this one being an indicator like, oh, am I extroverted or introverted? Am I more conscientious or not? This is more used for screening purposes to assess for abnormal personality tendencies. Really read that as, does this person have any indicators of mental illness of a variety of sorts? It's also used by employers, particularly like military, government entities, assesses things like family problems, etc. And the really important thing to think about when looking at tests or inventories like the MMPI, or later some of the inventories we'll talk about with the big 5 personality traits, is that this test is empirically derived. And really what that boils down to is it's based on verifiable evidence. So for example, they develop this pool of items, questions, okay, and they have a variety of people take the test. People without known mental illnesses and people with known mental illnesses. And then they look at how do these various groups answer the questions. So for example, you'll see there's some questions that would indicate maybe the person has schizophrenia. And if we compare someone who answers this inventory, who we know has schizophrenia, versus someone that does not have schizophrenia and how they answer, we can make comparisons that help us to discriminate or tell the difference between various groups. So it's based on evidence, not just someone's hunches or something that someone thought sounded nice. So these are just some sample MMPI questions. I just wanted to give you some wide ranges of the types of things on there. So number 2, I have a good appetite. 3, I wake up fresh and rested most mornings. 11, a person should try to understand his dreams and be guided by or take warning from them. 13, I work under a great deal of tension. 26, I feel that it's certainly best to keep my mouth shut when I'm in trouble. 27, evil spirits possess me at times. So you can see very wide range, and this is just a small sampling. Each of those questions corresponds to different scales. So you can see some of the examples here. So they would be, each question is coded. So looking at those individual questions, how a person answered, could give indicators in these areas as well as others. So again, it's comparing people who we know have it as it was being developed versus people that don't. And then we know, like, if someone says yes to 27, that's a good indicator of schizophrenia, for example. So what I'd like you to answer is, why is being empirically derived, think of that really as based in evidence, an important tool in psychological testing? Really relate it more to personality psychological testing. So I'll give you a moment. Okay, so hopefully you said something like, that's what gives or lends validity to the test. That's how we know when someone says this is a personality inventory, can I actually trust these results? Related to this idea in personality inventories is something called the Barnum effect. And this is the phenomenon where individuals give high accuracy ratings to descriptions of their personality, kind of like the horoscope that you see here, that supposedly are tailored specifically to them, but that are in fact vague and general enough to apply to a wide range of people. So again, I told you I might be bursting a lot of bubbles, and you are free to ignore me if you disagree. But looking at things like your horoscope, many times they are written in a broad enough way where if you read it and you want to believe it, then you will find something that is true about you. Okay. I was trying to make light. I found this one circulating online, if you've seen it, about your horoscope right now. Okay. You'll be spending time in your home. But if you read a horoscope, take a look. Most of the time, they're general enough to where they could apply to you if you wanted to. But in reality, they are vague enough that they could apply to lots of different people. It doesn't really matter your experiences, your background, etc. Just something to be aware of. So I'd love for you to give a modern example of the Barnum effect. What other examples outside of like a horoscope do you see where people's personalities are written about in a more general way? I'll give you a moment to think of an example. Okay. So there's lots of different things. I think of like every BuzzFeed quiz, all those things you see on social media now that are circulating Instagram. I know probably y'all are on Facebook, like, old people like me. But there's all sorts of things. What Disney character are you most like? All sorts of stuff you could put there. All right, getting to the good stuff now is the big 5 factors. So first, let's talk about the background. How did these come to be? So the big 5 personality traits or dimensions were built upon the work of the Einstein dimensions. Remember when we talked about factor analysis, that extroversion, introversion, stable, unstable. But built upon that by Costa and McCrae. And they said that personality can really be boiled down into these 5 major areas. There's 2 different acronyms or mnemonics that you may choose to use. One of them is OCEAN, as I have them arranged here. The other one is going to be CANOE. Okay. So the 5 are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And what I want you to think about or understand first is, unlike the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, that said you're either extroverted or introverted, okay? In this, you are somewhere on a range, okay? So for example, we have extroversion here. You are somewhere where you're either very extroverted or you are not extroverted, or anywhere in the middle. And the same goes with all of these. You are maybe very open to a little bit open, kind of open, teensy bit open, all the way down the line. And when you take the personality inventory, the Big Five inventory, you'll be able to see that, and it will give you a score on a 100-point scale. So you might get something like openness, 55, conscientiousness, 27, extroversion, 44, etc. Okay. So let's talk about what these mean. And I think this shows it well. This is another mnemonic that you may use is canoe. Again, either is great, whatever is going to work for you. And just an FYI as well, I have seen these individual traits show up as FRQ terms, where literally you had to talk about conscientiousness and apply it to the prompt, or openness to experience and apply it to the prompt. So that is not out of the question. Okay. So notice again, I love that it has arrows here. It's a range, and you could fall anywhere within this range. Okay. So at one end, we look at conscientiousness. At the low end, you might be very disorganized, very careless, very impulsive. At the other extreme, you may be very organized, very careful, very disciplined. Maybe you're right here in the middle. Maybe it depends. Okay. There is an interesting research study where some researchers figured out with a lot of accuracy, actually, someone's level of conscientiousness by taking a look at their bedroom, like just a photograph. And what they found is that people, as you might expect, people whose personal spaces were very organized tended to score very high in conscientiousness. If it was disorganized, stuff all over the place, low in conscientiousness. Okay. Next, so think of this as like organization, responsibility, like on top of things, very disciplined. I imagine that if you score high in conscientiousness, you are not the procrastinator. You like to just get things done. Okay. Next is agreeableness. At the low end, you are someone who's ruthless. Think of out for yourself. You might be more suspicious of others' motives, uncooperative. You prefer to do things independently. Where at the other end, the high end, if you score down here, you're more soft-hearted. You really care about others. You're more trusting. You're more helpful. Okay. And again, you can be anywhere in between. Neuroticism, think of being emotionally stable. So this is the only one that works in the opposite way. Okay. So if you score low in neuroticism, you're more calm, you're more secure, you're more self-satisfied. If you score high in neuroticism, kind of the key thing here is high anxiety, more insecure, more self-pitying. Okay. Next is openness. Okay. If you score low in openness, you kind of like things to stay the same. You really like routine. You're okay going to a restaurant and ordering the same meal every time you go. You're okay, like right now, where your days are pretty much the same day after day. If you score high in openness, you love variety. When you go to a restaurant, you want to try something new. You don't want to eat the same thing that you've already had. You have a very creative imagination. You're very independent. You're okay doing your own thing. Okay. And then finally is extroversion. At the low end, this is where we would call more introverted. If you're down here, you're more reserved. You're more not sober and like you never had a drink, but more chill. I guess I'll put it that way. If you're at a party and you're down here in terms of extroversion, it's not that you won't go to the party, but you want just those couple friends that you feel comfortable with. Where if you score high in extroversion, you're like, okay, being the center of attention. You're very sociable. You're very fun loving. You want all eyes on you. Okay. Or again, anywhere in between. So we're going to watch a video. I'm going to give you a little precursor though, that goes with some movie clips that demonstrate these 5 personality traits. Just a heads up, it follows the Ocean mnemonic, but I actually don't show a clip for neuroticism, mostly because it had too much profanity, In this particular video, I wasn't able to find one that I thought showed it as well. So I'll just reiterate what neuroticism is at the end. So here you go.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Want to change the world? There's nothing to it.
Okay, so I'm responsible, I'm organized, but hey, I can be a kook.
All right, you madcap gal. Try to imagine this. The phone bill arrives, but you don't pay it right away.
Why not?
Because you're a kook. Instead, you wait until they send you a notice.
I could do that. Okay. Then, you let me go grocery shopping. No problem. I am not done yet. And I buy laundry detergent, but it's not the one with the easy pour spout. Why would someone do that? One might wonder. But I would be fine with that.
Someone's left a glass on the coffee table. There's no coaster. It's a cold drink. It's a hot day. Little beads of condensation are inching their way closer and closer to the surface of the wood.
Stop it!
How you doing? Come here a lot? It's a nice place.
Take us through the house. I won't make you baby.
What in the world is going on up in here? Am I the only one listening to this? Man, destroying a classic.
Till the fire does up. Don't stop till you get enough. Keep on. Till the fire does up. Don't stop till you get enough. Boom! Till the fire does up. Till the fire does up. Don't stop till you get enough. Get on.
I can't take no more of this, man.
Get closer, oh, get closer. I'm burning now. Just love me till you don't know how. Come on, to the four stops. Don't stop till you get enough. Keep on to the four stars up. Don't stop till you get enough. Keep on to the four steps up. Oh, come on, girls. Come on. To the fourth. Yes, don't stop till you. Come on. Come on.
Bubba. Bubba was my best good friend. I had to make sure that he was okay. And on my way back to find Bubba, well, there was this boy laying on the ground. I couldn't just let him lay there all alone and scared the way he was. So I grabbed him up and run him out of there. Every every time I went back looking for Bubba, somebody else was saying, "Help me, Forrest, help me."
Here, here. Here it is.
I started to get scared that I might never find Bubba.
Everybody listen up.
Okay. So I want you to think about, hopefully I cut it off before the F-bomb that was coming up. Can't tell because I can't hear it as I play it for you all. I want you to think about, since I can't show this clip, for neuroticism, what movie might show neuroticism well, where you have a character who's very anxious? Just something to think about. So just to review, because I'm going to have you write about these in just a moment. At the beginning, so we used ocean as our mnemonic. So our first one was openness. The clip used there was from the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and is talking about Willy Wonka being highly creative with this world that he's created within his factory. Creativity is definitely a sign of openness, open to new experiences. Next, we had conscientiousness. And hopefully you picked up on the main character that displays conscientiousness was Monica. Things have to be a certain way. If they are not done properly or in the right time, she doesn't like it, to put it lightly. Next was extroversion. In Rush Hour 2, you could see that he was up singing, dancing. He wanted to be the center of attention, so very much swung to high levels of extroversion. And then finally, our last one with the Forrest Gump clip was agreeableness. Very much wanted to help others, put others before himself as he was carrying people out of the jungle in Vietnam. All right, here we go. So what I'm going to have you do, this is actually our last slide, is you're going to be taking that personality inventory, but before you take it, I want you to make a prediction. Okay? You're going to type it out for me, but you may also want to write it down just on a scrap paper for yourself, just to see what do you think you are before you take that test. So based on the description of the big 5 factors, predict where you are on each of the dimensions. This is also great practice of remembering them. So I literally want you to spell out the names. Remember, you can use ocean or canoe as your mnemonics. You'll tell me, I'll give you like extroversion for the E. Write out extroversion and just tell me, you don't have to give a number, but just say low, middle, or high for each of the 5. So you can write out the name of it, of the trait, low, middle, high. Okay, that's all I want. Once you're done with that, you are good to go. Have a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoy taking the personality inventory. Thursday, we finish up new content. We have one last set of notes. That will be our last set of notes that I record for you for new content. And you're good to go. Have a great rest of your day.